Welcome everybody to Apple Insider. It is Andrew here, and today we are talking about this guy. You can't probably see too much in this shot, but this is the brand new Nikon Z5. Now it is fall, which means it is basically camera season alongside iPhone season. So today we're going to be talking about the Z5. We're going to compare the Z5, which is Nikon's new entry-level full-frame mirrorless camera, and we're going to compare it to the Z6, and then just kind of give you a whole pile of sample photos, sample shots, and let you guys kind of make decisions for yourself. We're also going to talk about connectivity and how this works with all of your Apple gear. So let's go ahead and dive into this thing, checking out the Nikon Z5 entry-level full-frame mirrorless camera. Before we get into our usage of the camera and our Z6 compare, let's just run through some of the basic specs of the Nikon Z5. So first up, this is part of their new mirrorless line using their Z mount system. So it mounts to all their new Z lenses. There are adapters to work with older f-mount lenses too, so you don't have to worry about that. There's even range extenders, so you can use smaller lenses and get some additional focal length there, getting some additional zoom without having to pick up completely separate lenses. There's been more and more Z-mount lenses coming out since the original Nikon Z6 and Z7 were released, and then we also the Z50 after that. So a bunch of different lenses to play around with. We've been using our 35mm 1.8 and our 24-70 f4. So a couple different lenses that we've been playing with, as well as a few of our older vintage Nikon lenses using our F to Z adapter. Looking at the ports and stuff on the camera, on the left-hand side, you'll find a headphone jack output as well as a mic input there. We also have a control button or a control input to control with a clicker, as well as HDMI and a USB-C port, power everything up using USB-C. I do dislike that they put that USB-C port all the way to the top, because if there's one thing that we're using more frequently, it's that USB-C port, especially to connect to our iPads and our Macs. So I'm bummed that they put that so high on your port kind of profile here, so I wish that was more towards the bottom for easier access. Of course, on the right hand side we have our two SD card slots for redundant shooting and a lot of memory there. Controls, everything on the back is going to be the same as it was for the Z6 and Z7, but the top of the camera has changed. Now there's no longer the mode wheel there on the left hand side. It's been moved to the right, which is great because this thing is incredibly ergonomic and comfortable to hold in your hand. We love holding onto this thing, but before, when these controls were on this side, it made it a little bit difficult. You had to use two hands essentially to switch modes. So I'm glad they moved this to here to over here. There is no lock in place, which means it is a little bit easy to bump, hit a little bit of weird way, and that dial can turn around, but it's still in a great spot. You can control it with your thumb while you are shooting. No need for your extra hand in there. So do like the repositioning of that. Wish it maybe had a lock, but if it had a lock, you'd have to have an extra hand to assist in turning it. The display is gone from up there. We saw with the Z6 and the Z7. We didn't use that display all that much, so we don't mind the compromise of putting the mode button in a better place. Now the display on the back, same thing as the Z5 or the Z6 and Z7, but it is about half the resolution, about 1 million dots compared to 2 million dots. Still a very solid display, and luckily the viewfinder has not changed. That is the same quality as the others, with 100% coverage of what you're seeing on the camera. The sensor is a full frame sensor. It is 24.3 megapixels, just shy of the 24.5 megapixels on the Z6, and well below the 42, I believe, megapixels on the Z7, but above the 20-ish megapixels on the Z50. So a good middle option there, because it's the same resolution as the Z6, but there are a few changes we'll talk about in a little bit. Otherwise, pretty standard as far as the Nikon cameras go. The screen tilts, it pivots down and up. Very comfortable. It doesn't go to the sides, but honestly, we never really use that with the cameras that do offer that, so it wasn't a huge deal for us. The tilting is kind of the biggest thing. So we've been using this camera for about a week now. We've come from the Z6 and the Z7, and we've used those two extensively, so we're pretty familiar with the Z line of cameras from Nikon, so we knew what we were kind of getting into when we were seeing out the new camera. And honestly, we are very impressed with this. There are the small changes, such as the polycarbonate body rather than the magnesium alloy for the back and the bottom of this, but you really don't notice the reduction in quality. It still feels extremely solid, strong. It is weatherproof, dustproof, so even if you get caught out in the rain, you're okay there. It still has the 5-axis stabilizer in there, so if you're shooting on any of the new lenses, you have 5-axis stabilization in the camera. And if you're going to any older cameras or older lenses, Sony's or Nikon's VR lenses, as we see here. These guys, you still get 3 additional axes of stabilization, so it still builds on that and adds additional benefits to those older lenses. So we just love that in here. And one feature, we love shooting with a nice fast aperture, opening things all the way up, and this thing can actually shoot at 1/8,000 per second, which is incredibly fast. So you can shoot with an incredibly fast aperture and have a really quick shutter speed without having to throw that variable ND filter on the front of your camera. So just incredibly quick shots, and I love that that kind of level of feature made it into what is supposed to be an entry-level camera. We've honestly had no real qualms with this. Our biggest issues with this camera are the limitations on how fast you can shoot, only 4.5 shots per second, and the crop factor on video. Those are our biggest gripes with this camera. Otherwise, this is an absolute slam dunk. I mean, you're several $100s cheaper than the Z6, and it has pretty much everything you need. Image quality is going to be on par until you're looking at really low light shots and shadows, where you're going to miss that backside illuminated sensor, but otherwise this thing has been crisp, and you can see all of our sample shots we've taken with this. These are all unedited right off the sensor. Just everything looks absolutely crispy. We are in love with this camera. It lacks a little bit on that video side, but that is what the Z6 is for. This thing is incredible. We have loved Nikon Z lenses, Z cameras, Z mount cameras, and this is just another slam dunk. I mean, it's cheaper than the Z6, but you got everything that you need here. Even the stabilization, the incredibly fast shooting, the autofocus system. We had a few issues with that early on with the Z6 and Z7, but Nikon fixed that with some updates for better tracking, and this takes advantage of all of those changes here. So any of the issues that we had before with the autofocus system, boom. Now, it doesn't seem to be as sticky sometimes. Sometimes we notice it picks up a little bit on the background versus the foreground subject, but it was like once or twice really in our shooting, and it's so easy just to tap on the screen where you want to focus. Boom, done, good to go. So there was no issues there. As far as using this with your Apple gear, whew, this is what you need. So there are a few different things. One, USB-C. Connect it over to your iPad and you go to the Files app. You can transfer it to external drives or jump into Photos. There's full support for the RAW shots on this right away, so no issue working with RAW photos over on the iPad or on the Mac. There's also the mobile app Snapbridge. Snapbridge allows you to easily transfer all of your photos from your camera over to your iPhone or iPad. It can do 2 megapixel shots, or it can do full resolution shots. Just take a little bit longer. It can connect over Wi-Fi. Also connecting over Bluetooth, it can actually add all the metadata for GPS geotagging, so you get all your location data synced to your photos on here. You can also capture all of your shots with the Snapbridge app. Connect it and you can shoot in full manual mode. You can also jump into AP or S and change all those settings as well. So you can really frame your shot, line everything up. Don't have to touch your camera to fire, so you don't have to worry about jiggling anything. You don't need an actual remote to go along with it. And you can shoot in video mode as well. You can add a timer so you can literally be in a group shot, frame everything up, then fire it, hide your phone away, boom, take your group shot all directly from your phone with this thing. Very easy to control and use the camera as well as getting those photos across using that Snapbridge application. So we're going to be comparing this primarily against the Z6. Now the Z50 is lower, is cheaper than the Z5, but the Z50 is a crop sensor, DX sensor, where this is an FX sensor, is a full frame sensor, and we're just going to be comparing kind of full frame cameras here, the Z5 to the Z6, the entry level to the kind of intermediate model. Now they both come in with a roughly 24 megapixel sensor. They both have the same X-Speed 6 processor, but there are a few differences there. So one, the Z6 has a backside illuminated sensor, a BSI sensor, which is actually similar to what Apple is doing over on the iPhone side, and basically that backside illuminated sensor allows more light to come into the sensor, just gives a little bit better low light performance to the Z6. You're going to notice this a lot in studio shots or anything that is particularly low light, and you're going to notice in the shadows there's going to be more grain, more noise on the Z5 than the Z6. Now it's not a ton, we did shoot quite a few of these, and we didn't notice anything that was going to be like, no, we have to go with the Z6 because of that, but it is something that you're going to notice. We also noticed that with the ISOs, the Z6 is able to achieve a 204,800 equivalent ISO, where the Z5 only goes up to 102,400 equivalent. I also mentioned that these have the same processor in there, but the Z5 is only capable of 4.5 shots a second, where the Z6 can get up to 12. This is a little bit bothersome for us. Now, 4.5 is actually pretty standard for its class, but considering that the Z6 with the same processor is able to shoot 12 frames per second, it seems like Nikon may have artificially limited that to make there a bigger difference between the Z5 and the Z6. Still, the Z5 is able to get an impressive 100-shot buffer. You can shoot burst mode 4.5 per second for 100 shots before that buffer starts to kick in. And that is absolutely impressive, a truly pro-level feature that we are really happy to see in this entry-level camera. The Z5 also struggles a little bit with video. Now, Nikon has really positioned the Z6 as the filmmaker's camera, the vlogger's camera. They literally even sell a filmmaker's package, partnering it with the Atmos recorder and everything that you need to shoot video with the Z6, whereas the Z5 is really meant for photography. The biggest difference there is when you're shooting in 4K, you're actually going to get a 1.7 times crop. So you're cropped in a little bit, which definitely makes a difference, especially if you're shooting something up close. You're really going to notice that crop factor. Honestly, for video, we're definitely looking at the Z6. There's a huge bunch of differences the Z6 has compared to the Z5, as well as even the Z7. So the Z6 is where it is at for filmography and vloggers, video makers. Definitely the Z6. It also has ProRes raw output to those Atmos recorders if you pay for the $200 upgrade. Again, all on the Z6, not here on the Z5. But do not worry, the Z5 definitely kicks butt. There are a few things that the Z5 does that are actually better than the Z6 and possibly even the Z7. First up is those memory card slots. We kind of showed this off. There are two UHS 2 SD card slots in here. So one, it's using SD. Now, SD is not quite as good as the QXD or CF Express cards that we're getting on the Z6 and Z7, but because there are two slots, you have that redundancy. So you can shoot photos on one and video on the other, your JPEGs to one and backup RAWs on the other, or just two sets of JPEGs. So that way, if something ever happens to one card, you have a backup. A lot of prosumers are going to love the redundancy aspect of having two card slots in there. And SDs, while they're a little bit slower and have smaller capacities than the CF Express, they at least are readily available and far, far cheaper. You can pick those things up for nothing. And a lot of computers even have readers already built in. Picking up an iMac, already got a reader built in there. And readers are just completely prevalent out there, so it's very easy to get a hold of. Another big difference is this is using the EN-ELC battery, whereas the Z6 and Z7 are using the EN-ELB battery. When you have the B model, it basically enables the in-camera charging. And if you put an EN-ELB battery in here, it can do the in-camera charging over USB-C. But what makes the Z5 different, and this is a feature that it only has, is it can actually be charged over USB-C while you're shooting. It has continuous power mode, so you can throw this thing up on a tripod and continue to charge it powered up over USB-C. So that is very unique here. That EN-ELC battery also gives you a larger battery life than the Z6 and the Z7, regardless if you're using the viewfinder or the monitor on the back. So some impressive power components to the Z5. The mirrorless camera market has been heating up. We are seeing new cameras from Panasonic, from Sony, from Canon, and of course we're seeing them from Nikon, and they are all vying for your attention. Nikon has done a great job. They're one of the oldest names in cameras, and they made the cognizant decision here to focus really on photos. And they have done that. They have delivered an incredible photo experience on a cheaper camera than the Z6 with all the benefits of its Z-mount line. Full frame camera, entry level, pretty much everything you need from the pro levels. Even though this is an entry level camera, nothing about it feels like an entry level camera. And of course, it works amazingly well with all of your Apple gear, your iPhone, your iPad, and of course, your Mac. So it really has everything an Apple user is looking for. If you guys want to grab one of these, they sell them standalone if you already got some Z lenses around, but if not, they have a few kit options too. And if you're looking for video, step up. Go to the Z6, maybe pick up that filmmaker kit, get it bundled with an Atmos recorder. But either way, I want to know what you guys think. What do you think of all of our sample shots that we showed off? Let me know down below in the comments, or reach me on Twitter at Andrew_OSU, and stay tuned to Apple Insider for all your Apple news as well as future camera reviews.